Welcome back to the Turnaround Boardroom. I am your host, Paul Maskill, and this podcast is for home service business owners who want to understand their numbers better. We're going to stop lying to ourselves. We remove our emotions, remove our ego, and all the excuses, and we're going to let the numbers guide us. We're going to focus on helping home service business owners create predictable profitability and consistent positive cash flow. Lastly, remember, all of our episodes discuss real businesses. Nothing discussed should be considered financial, legal, or tax advice for your specific situation. Every business, including yours, is different. Super excited for today. Today's guest is Chris Buttenham. He is the co-founder and CEO of Reigns. If you guys haven't heard of it, you're definitely in for a treat. He helps home service business owners retain and align top leaders without giving up any control with alternative equity. He works hands-on with contractors to align incentives, reduce key person risk, and turn great businesses into durable, transferable legacies. Chris, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. Let's just get right into it.
Sure.
How do you work with home service businesses every day?
Yeah, I mean, we help them with their legacy. Effectively, what they come to us looking to do is usually retain key personnel. Sometimes it's because they know they need to kind of retain that bench of leaders in pursuit of an exit one day. Sometimes everyone has retention issues, right? And so it's like, sometimes it's a broad, hey, I'm looking for ways, unique incentives to give my people a reason to stick around. Sometimes they're getting pressures from external sources that they're competing for talent with folks who are using unique ways to attract that talent, whether it's through equity or other incentives, and so they're looking for a way to level the playing field. And then day to day, we work with them. And I like your kind of like positioning here, right? Like let's get real about the numbers. I mean, they tell us what their budget is. We kind of try and take them. Bring them back down to earth, show them what's realistic, put an incentive plan behind it that actually will give them the best chance of hitting those numbers, which is to help them grow their business, become more profitable, but often it's in pursuit of an exit one day. And so that's kind of how we work with contractors typically.
Gotcha. So obviously every business is different, every relationship's different, but what's average range size of companies that come to you okay, I think we're building something here. We've got a pretty good leadership team. How do we keep them? What's kind of that, revenue size or EBITDA level that you typically get pulled in?
Yeah, sweet spot is around 2 or 3 million in revenue, all the way up to, 20, 30 million in revenue. I would say there is a unique class of contractors where maybe they've done it before and they approach us right as they're starting because they know, they've been in the game, okay, here, I already know who my bench of at least initial key leaders are. And so I want to set up incentives to have them run with me because they're building with an exit in mind. But most of my customers are kind of legacy or family businesses who come to us around the $2 or $3 million mark and up.
Gotcha. And what are some of the leaders that they're looking to retain? And, at least when they come to you, and obviously sometimes it might change as time goes on, but,
right.
When they come to you at, call it $3 million in revenue, who are usually those key people they have there? And then as they grow, what are some of the other key people they put in place?
Yeah. So when they come to us, it's usually, you got a GM or maybe you're just hiring your first GM and you need a way to incentivize them to join this mission. At that size, you may or may not have trades managers, but there's often an incentive gap with office staff. So even a person who's leading your call center or marketing, they usually don't have any variable compensation. And so to have them incentivized to act more like owners is usually a gap. And then there's, one or two tenured techs that have been with them for a very long time. Maybe at the beginning, they are like the trainers of other technicians. Those are key folks that they're looking to retain at that level. And then as they grow, I think what we is selfishly, I'll say, like, once they learn how easy it is to actually provide unique incentives, and they always end up looking to do this with more folks. But it's usually more office staff, more management, and we do work with some companies where we go deep all the way through the field, but we tend to be like key technicians, office staff, and managers.
Gotcha. And what does that look like? Because like you said, a lot of times their office manager, anybody in their office, their dispatch CSRs, call center managers, they might not have any performance pay or variable compensation,
Right.
people in the field that are key techs. Just give us, kind of a vanilla company that's, they want to incentivize, maybe their dispatch for revenue. They want to incentivize their call center for whether it's call booking rate or jobs booked or whatever, and then they want to retain some key technicians that have been with them a long time.
Yeah. So so a down the fairway kind of incentive plan structure for these folks might be, you got a long-term incentive under the alternative equity sort of incentive bucket. Think like phantom equity or phantom stock, if you've heard of that incentive. Give them all some percentage of the upside in the business if you plan on selling one day. And even if you don't, it's a great insurance policy for them. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be forfeit if that employee leaves prior to a sale. So that gives them kind of a carrot to stick around. Then you layer on something like a profit share. Now, the profit share simple structure would be, let's say our goal is to hit 10% net profit for the quarter. Anything over and above that, we'll share 20% with these folks that we just mentioned. Simplest way to do it is you share that 20% of profits above the goal equally. Now you may say, oh, well, each person will contribute to that disproportionately. You may be right, but show them an equal on target share of the profits to kind of create this rising tides lift all ships type of mentality. And then if we use the example of, let's say, the call center manager, give them a individual performance condition like booking rate. That's something they can control, that's in front of them on their day-to-day, that ultimately rolls up into profitability and growth. So what you're saying is, I'm going to compensate the team for the company being profitable. I'm going to show you, the employee, exactly the one or two things that you can control that rolls up into that goal. And then if we're more profitable, the enterprise value of the business is more valuable. And if we sell, you get a piece of it.
Amazing. So really there's three layers, right? So there's what you can control individually, what we're doing as a whole. And then when we do this as a whole for a long enough time, then you can get something at the end when we sell this
You
thing.
nailed it. Yep.
Curious on, because I know a lot of owners are kind of hesitant to talk about ever selling their company until after they've signed their asset purchase agreement, and then they're like, surprise, we sold our company. How do you get, everybody rowing in that same direction, knowing, man, I really love working for Chris, and now I know that, in 3 to 5 years, he might not be owning this company anymore. Obviously, the financial part helps, but there's the culture and, the family and all this stuff.
Yeah.
How do you get them on board where it's like, we're okay sharing this? Because I know a lot of owners don't want to share any of that. Not the dollar, but the intel per se. How do you get everyone rowing in the same direction there?
Yeah, fair question. There's a few layers in that question. I think what I've experienced firsthand in the field is the most transparent and communicative owners are the most successful. They grow at the fastest rate. They're the most profitable. They have the best cultures. And so I would just say, if you're looking to be better, I would probably be more transparent with the team. And the way I think the best contractors that we've worked with have positioned this to them is like, look, especially a lot of the legacy business owners are like, look, I'm 55, I'm 60. The reality is I'm not going to be around doing this forever. And I want to bring you guys with me. And rather than say you get nothing or this is a surprise, let me bring you into the fold. And just that fact has them act more like owners. Then you layer on the incentives that are performance-based. And it's just kind of like answering the question, what's in it for me, right? And it's a win-win, because when buyers are evaluating a company to buy, they look and they see, oh, the owners that are proactive and they are proactively setting up a reason for these employees to stick around, not even up into the sale, but even through the sale with some golden handcuff features. That's going to bolster the value of the company. And that's a win-win-win. The buyer knows that the employees, the key employees in the business aren't going to leave the minute the deal's closed because it wasn't a surprise to them. They also know that the enterprise value of the business is going to have durability because those key operators aren't leaving, and the owner gets a better exit price because of that insurance policy that's already baked in. Gotcha.
That's super clear, and obviously having that transparency in the long run, I think especially, the average age of owners in the trades isn't super young. So when you can kind of frame it of like, hey guys, I'm not going to do this forever. I just physically can't, and I want to retire at some point. So when you guys start getting involved, though, y'all have like an entire platform. You make this super simple, because I feel where a lot of people get stuck is like, I don't know even where to start with that. Sounds like a great idea. Sounds like a lot of lawyer fees. I don't know how to track it. Just give our listeners, for those that have no idea what Rains does, just like, kind of the 30,000 foot view of how you guys make this possible for, the $2 million plumbing company.
Yeah, for sure. And, in an effort to try not to be super self-promotional, like I'm an advocate for the incentive structures in general. We've clearly, made it extremely painless. And the way we do that is a few ways. So one, the biggest hurdle in a lot of these is just the cost and access to the right people. So prior to Rains, you'd have to find a compensation and benefits attorney. They are anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 an hour. So you're looking at, like at least $30,000 to stand up what I would call a reputable alternative equity program. And when you do that, you're really only left with documents, only to be, filed away in a filing cabinet. And you've got to track the liability on your own. So what we've done is we actually did the heavy lifting. We worked with fancy compensation and benefits attorneys. We employ them. They created a framework that basically gives contractors a template. And then they work with my team, who gives them a white glove experience of actually designing a plan that is basically customizing those templates. And now they have this very, very beautiful alternative equity program, all legally compliant with 409A. And then to your point, we have a software platform that allows them to track that, track the liability of it, and we are the source of record. So if there's ever any dispute, everything is signed and stored electronically with an audit trail in our system. But most importantly, the really cool thing is employees get visibility. So it turns it into this living, breathing program where when you grant an incentive, whether that's like a phantom equity award or whether that's a profit share, they can see what their incentive's worth and, more importantly, what they can do to unlock it, which to the employee is what's in it for me, money in pocket. And to the owner, it's like, oh, I'm getting more yield out of my people by aligning my incentives with theirs.
That's awesome. And the visibility is huge because, even when I work with clients, when they're talking about performance pay, it's like, even just for a technician, the more complicated and the less visible and the more confusing is like, I don't even know how I'm getting paid. So like,
exactly.
If you're going to give somebody all these things like, oh, cool, variable compensation, oh, profit share, oh, phantom equity.
Right.
But if they just sign the document and forget about it tomorrow, they don't really realize the value of it. So I think that's super huge. 100%. So I want to dive into like kind of the three different, layers that you guys put into companies or help, integrate into companies, just to kind of get it, a little bit more insight into, some best practices, results you've seen. So let's just start at the, the individual role level, whether it's technicians, call center, service manager. Give our listeners just like a couple real life examples of, some incentive structures that you guys have helped put in place and what that has done for a company.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see. I think so my favorite is Phantom Equity because it's got such a bad name for an incredible benefit that's historically been very inaccessible to the independent business owner and very accessible to, say, private equity, who's, quite frankly, competing pound for pound for this talent against you. And so the biggest impact we've seen with this type of instrument is when owners truly understand it, they understand that it's effectively free if you set it up correctly, where basically you're saying, I'm granting employees a contract that gives them a bonus in the future if certain conditions are met. If those conditions aren't met, you don't owe them anything. And that's not wool over the eyes. That is called a win-win situation, right? And in a lot of cases, what we found is, there's always like 2 or 3, maybe even 5 people where they're like super key to the company. Maybe they've even talked about, I'm going to give you 5%. I'm going to give you 3%. They've actually talked turkey with these people in the past. But then there's a whole host of other folks like the office staff we're talking about or some of the key technicians where that hasn't been a topic of discussion, but they'll just give them some nominal amount. So my favorite thing is like give someone a quarter of a percent phantom equity in your business and see what happens. What we've found in practice, because we've interviewed some of these employees, like, this is incredible. I took this home to my spouse and they said, you have a real career, like you have a real job. They've said, the last company I was with, they said they were never going to sell, but ended up selling to private equity and I was left with nothing. This is at the very least an insurance policy. So the impact that you can have from doing very little on the phantom equity side is enormous. I like to just kind of call that out. In general, across all of our incentives, 93% of employees who have ever been granted an incentive through our platform are still employed the same companies they were granted those incentives with. So the retention benefits are extremely clear. And then what we're seeing is because we value the business for the purpose of the plan, when you implement usually a combination of the incentives like a profit sharing plan and a phantom equity program, anywhere from 16 to 20% increase in enterprise value 12 to 24 months after implementing the program. So what we're seeing in practice is these companies are getting more fit. They're putting the what's in it for me in front of the employees. But I think most importantly, and you kind of alluded to this when you talk about performance pay, is the number one issue with any of these programs is they get overcomplicated. And so we've actually become very opinionated on what the plans should look like. And for us, the challenge is actually in giving you less options. To make them more simple so that they can be more understood and they can actually drive real business results.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes perfect sense because, you look at the most successful business, even a home service, when you give your customer 3 options instead of like 12,
That's right.
Okay,
yeah.
I know exactly what I want. I want the better option. Let's go make it happen. Curious on the valuations. How does you guys or an M&A advisor, investment bank look at, say that 20% of the profit over 10%. So, say the goal was 10%, we hit 15% and say say that extra 5% was, I don't know, call it $500,000 just to keep it super simple.
Sure.
Now we're going to give 20% of that away. So we're going to give $100,000 of that away to our team, whoever earned it. How do they revalue that? Is that an add back or is that just an expense and we just kind of, eat it because we know overall we're still growing?
Well, it's an expense and it's a write-off against future profits, right? So it's actually a win-win. And the same thing for the phantom equity liability is you carry it as a liability on the balance sheet. And then when it's paid, it actually is deducted from the overall tax burden. So it's either that it goes to the employees or it goes to the tax man or to buy the owner a new boat.
Gotcha. And you had kind of alluded to it, the increase in enterprise value. So I wanted to go there for just a little bit. We kind of went over, how do we incentivize individual roles? And we've talked about the profit share. When it comes to selling the owners are going to sell their business. If you have like an example of, what a company looked like when they started with you to time when they exited, what some of their employees got, increase in valuation, all that, I think that would be super helpful just to show how powerful it is to have this retention, have the key people, when the buyer's doing due diligence, all those things that we know add up to value, but sometimes it's all just fake when it's on a piece of paper until we actually close the deal. Yeah. So if you have any like good examples, I think that'd be super interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I'll give you one. I'll kind of anonymize it because I don't have I don't know that I'm allowed to talk about it publicly, but there's a residential service company in a rural town on the East Coast, really, really small town. Business was doing about, I think 7 million when it sold. They approached us a couple years prior to exit. There was about, I think, 20 employees who got incentives, and they were able to sell that business for roughly 15x, if I'm not mistaken, which was 15x EBITDA, which is incredible. And I think what was cool was I spoke to the employees before and after the exit, and these employees shared roughly $500,000 amongst themselves. Some got a little more, some got a little less, which in a really small rural town, some of them had only been with the company for a year or two, it's life-changing. Like from what I understand, some of them put a down payment on a home, some of them bought motorcycles, whatever they wanted to do with it. But the coolest thing I think was talking to them before was so actually what happened was the business sold 55% because they sold to a platform. And the really cool thing was they were excited and super bought into the culture before because the owner was setting up a program like this. But the impact of the employees post-sale was even more surprising. Their trust and determination in that culture, in the business, and running for the second tranche, the 45%, was so much more convicted because they were in the money on an incentive. And so that's why we always encourage layering on the profit share, because it can give employees feedback and confidence along the way in pursuit of a sale to say, like, look, if we win, you win. And it just bolsters like, oh, this is real. Because I think a lot of people talk about profit shares, talk about equity arrangements and all these things, but then rubber meets the road, they never do it. Or like you said, employees don't actually know how, like, okay, I got a $1,000 bonus in my bank account. How the hell did that come about? Like I had no, I don't know what I did to receive it. And so I think because it was so real in this case, it made the employees just so much more bought in from our experience, and the retention in that business is incredible. I don't think they've lost more than a couple people in the 2 or 3 years that I've been working with them.
That's amazing. I appreciate you sharing that. So when these companies are getting ready, like when they're going through due diligence, right? Someone reached out, signed a letter of intent, going through the process. And maybe every company is different, but just curious on like, how much is the team aware at that point? Because it could take 6 to 9 months to close a business from signing a letter of intent. How much are they aware during that entire process? At least that what you've seen.
In this case, in the case I just described, they were quite aware. But again, right, and it's a little esoteric when you sign an LOI, but then like it's like I think it was like 9 or 10 months later was like when it was closed. Like they're like, is this guy full of shit? Is this actually happening? So that's where, again, transparency and communication is key, and having, layering in other incentive programs that are not just anchored to a change of control. I'm trying to think of, I will say on the other hand, there's lots of owners that keep that close to their chest, which is probably a mistake. Just because, people will create their own narratives in their head when they don't understand what's going on.
Yeah. Right. And then at some point you're going to have to tell a lot. If you're going to keep it close to the vest until closing day, you're going to have to lie at some point of like, why are these people in the shop, or who's this, or why do you keep
Right.
going there, or whatever it might
Right.
be. Let's rewind before we start to wrap this up. I just want to kind of rewind back to like the beginning of, when someone reaches out to you, just to maybe give our listeners a few things they could avoid. Maybe they're making some decisions right now that aren't great. What are some like the biggest problems you see within home service companies when they first reach out to you, saying, "Hey, I think we want to engage with Reigns to help keep our key employees."
Yeah. Biggest couple of things. Let's see. Bonusing on top line revenue. Never do that. You can't bonus on what you don't know. If you don't know what money you're going to make at the end of the year. I mean, I say that and most people will laugh, but you'd be surprised how many people come to us with top line bonus programs, which is insane. I already mentioned this, but overcomplication of everything, from anything from performance pay, like owners, and I get it. I've got empathy. I've owned several businesses over my life. It's like you think you're super creative. It's like, oh, like if they turn this knob and flip this lever, it's like this is how they're going to make more money and I'm going to be more efficient. But at the end of the day, if they don't understand it, then it's really not a benefit, and it's not going to yield the behavioral change that you're looking for. Another one is, even if you're bonusing on bottom line and like you're doing it correctly, and maybe it's even simple, the end of year kind of Christmas bonus is you get what's called the Santa Claus effect. Whereas again, it's like people don't fully understand, like, oh, it's the end of the year, so I think I'm going to get some money, but I don't really actually know why I'm getting it. So they start to be rosy around the holidays, but then you get no behavioral change for the rest of the year. That's another big one. And then I think like sleeping on long-term incentives. I think because it's been historically inaccessible, people think they're overcomplicated, or they try and complicate it. Like people that want to give traditional equity to employees because they think employees care about capital gains treatment or things like that. They don't, in a large part. There's a tool for every job. But for, the broad swath of home service businesses and their the lion's share of their employees, like traditional equity is not a great fit. And on the other hand, like think about these alternative equity incentives because they don't create a tax burden for the employee. They don't actually dilute your ownership or give up any control. And they create real upside and ownership alignment.
Yeah, that was going to be my last question before we wrap up, is just, comparing, call it phantom equity, all the things that we've talked about in the last 30 minutes or so to traditional equity. And you kind of hit on, a lot of the pros of, why phantom equity works. If they leave, it's not a big mess. We don't have to unwind anything. They don't really care about capital gains tax and all that. Anything to them is, it's more than what they're expecting to begin with. But are there any other discussion points, pros and cons? Why it makes more sense to do the phantom equity, variable compensation, profit share, all of that, versus actually giving away a part of the company?
Yeah, I think in plain English, if you want a partner, then give them traditional equity. If you want them to buy in, both monetarily and or from a liability perspective, then traditional equity is a great tool for that. Now, you're limited in your options when you're the average LLC or S Corp, so that does make it trickier, but it's not impossible. And so I see that the case when you're literally trying to bring in a partner. But for 99% of all other use cases, the practicality is employees generally don't have the money for the tax burden, and owners generally do not want to create an owner. And so in that case, you want to look at sort of non-qualified deferred compensation type plans like phantom stock or profit sharing to create that alignment without the headaches of of the securities effectively.
Love it. I think we're going to end it there, guys. If you guys have any questions, any interest in implementing something like this in your company, Chris, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you and learn more about what you and Rains do?
Yeah, so check us out, myreins.com, myreins.com. A lot of great free resources there. There's conversations with contractors so they can maybe understand what we've done with other folks. We wrote a book called Alternative Equity, and it's a completely non-promotional guide on how to set up incentive structures like phantom stock and profit sharing. Oftentimes we'll give it away. So if you go to our website, you can request a free copy, and we give it to contractors to help them. We're just trying to level the playing field with the education here and make sure that the independent guys have a fighting chance against the big corporations and private equity.
Awesome. Love it. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Guys, everyone that's listening, this is how professionals on the financial side of the trades look at things. If this episode resonated with you and you're ready to get your business financially healthy, head on over to the bluecollaradvisors.com. You can check out all the resources, show notes from this episode, and more. Chris, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Paul.